tanks over teachers, wealth over we the people, and the military-industrial complex over everything.
What about home energy assistance programs?
We should be spending more on defense. We should be spending more on defense to cope with all the challenges we face around the world.
We have more defense than the next 10 largest countries combined.
Let's hop into a CNN panel as they debate some of the proposed budget cuts by the Trump administration so we can really dive into what his domestic priorities are. So if you can, first take a moment, leave us a like. It helps us out a ton. We really appreciate it. And we'll be right back with the needed context.
There's a lot of spending coming in on the military side of things and on Homeland Security.
Oh, yes.
And then there are cuts that are pretty deep when it comes to the programs. Rental assistance block grants, low-income home energy assistance programs, clean energy, shelter and services programs over at FEMA. Those cuts are significant to those programs, but they still don't add up.
That's right, they don't.
They still don't pay for what the additional spending is.
The important thing to remember is if there is a recession, he'll know who to blame. So that's what matters. But you're exactly right about this budget. It seems like a gigantic gift to Democrats in 2026. This is not a budget that's going to help red states. I read this and I thought, it's like the Bush family's back again. It's making the rich richer, making the poor poorer, cutting education, feeding the war machine. A budget is a statement of values. And the values of this budget are tanks over teachers, wealth over we the people, and the military-industrial complex over everything.
Okay, hold on. Bro is absolutely cooking. I mean, he's spot on. And it makes it even funnier that MAGA likes to parrot and pretend that Trump is like a revolutionary who's here to fight the deep state and destroy the establishment. Like, he's not part of them. But then every time he comes in, he just feeds the Bush agenda of the military-industrial complex, or they pretend that he's fiscally responsible and will save our wasteful spending, and then he signs $8 trillion into debt into law. I mean, he's just a run-of-the-mill conservative who wants to spend to enrich the wealthy, cut to detriment the poor, and then ship that money to military lobbyists and the donor class so they, remain as his voter base. The things Trump wants to cut should alarm everyone. Why are we cutting FEMA to afford rich guy tax cuts? Why are we cutting rental assistance to afford rich guy tax cuts? Why do tax cuts for the rich mean more than low-income assistance with their energy needs?
America did have terrible inflation, but it was global because of COVID, and we had better inflation than all of our G7 capitalist allies.
Hold on just a second. Joe Biden starved America's defense.
Starved? He increased it, sir.
No, he actually, go back and look at Joe Biden's first budget.
He increased
military
the
went up
budget.
1.7% while he was doing double-digit increases to everything else. Well, he increased everything. Everything. So we have an imminent threat from China. We should be spending more on defense. We should be spending more on defense to cope with all the challenges we face around the world.
We have more defense than the next 10 largest countries combined.
Let's go back. So you want to encourage our NATO allies to spend more on their defense?
Oh, no, I want to encourage us to make our NATO allies our allies.
Okay.
There's two main points that can be discussed here, and the funniest part is how MAGA loves to talk about Biden's spending increases, despite those being matched with heavy debt reduction measures as well, and largely being programs that would also pay for themselves within the decade or begin providing revenue otherwise. Meanwhile, Republicans, Trump spends recklessly and they cut revenue in ways that aren't going to reduce debt or pay for themselves down the line, which is what creates the problem where, again, this is why Republicans are responsible for 15 of the last 16 recessions. Trump is probably going to make that 16 of the last 17 this year. The other, no one could draw any one-to-one lines ever. Literally, you just can't. From a Democrat policy, from a Biden policy, and the inflationary effects that we saw in our economy these last 4 years, it was so clearly a global issue. This is why every country in the world was dealing with it. It didn't start under Biden, and the trend didn't change under him negatively. And actually, in fact, under Biden, we went from under Trump, where we had the worst effects in the G7, it was affecting us the strongest, to then under Biden having the strongest bounce back and the least effects in the G7.
The whole argument around immigration especially is we need to get our country back so that we can spend these resources on Americans. But then he's doing that while also cutting services to Americans. What about that?
So you look at things like education. If you look at what his budget blueprint has put out from what I've seen reporting-wise, it is removing more of the federal bureaucracy and oversight and sending it back to the states. If you have heard from Republicans and those who believe in that, this is where it would go, which is less federal bureaucracy.
Okay,
I don't know why all of a sudden that seems like so
far-fetched.
But what about low-income home energy assistance?
What
about home energy assistance programs, which actually help a lot of rural parts of the country? What about shelter services for FEMA, which helps a lot of the South, which deals with a lot of, extreme weather. I mean, what about those things? Those
predict
are
that
all
Congress
things
will
that
put many of these things back
help
in.
his.
I mean, you have to love that the Republican defense of Trump's budget proposal is, well, Congress will fix it. The bad parts won't stay in. Like, even they know it's hilariously bad. But Abby's point at the beginning is the one that shouldn't be ignored. Trump and MAGA both spent years claiming that Biden was spending all of our money overseas and that he was giving it away to undocumented immigrants and that Trump was going to fix it and he was going to bring that money back to America and spend it on Americans because that's how it should be. Well, if Trump was going to fix that, why is he now cutting domestic spending and then increasing the military budget that will inevitably then be spent overseas and continue forever wars where more money will be poured into it? Oh, well, it turns out that you fell for it again, MAGA. He never cared about spending money in America. Instead, if anything, it was about spending more money to give it to the billionaires, because now the most menial programs for wide swaths of Americans are being slashed that people rely on because bureaucracy, right? Like, sorry, we're not hearing the send it to the states, smaller government is better arguments anymore. It's over with. Trump has shown us by rapidly defunding and closing agencies, mass laying off federal workers, and shrinking the power and scope of the government to consolidate it under one man, under one office, while simultaneously sending us into negative economic growth through his measures that he's done after that, destroying our markets and having the most chaotic and honestly, objectively just failed first 100 days of all time. It shows that small government isn't feasible. It's not effective. We've now tried it. MAGA forced us to, and it's a horrendous failure. The failure the left promised. Big government is what we need. Sorry, MAGA. Cope harder.